This is another episode. Jacob and we're calling it Mahoning Movement 100% now, right?
Yeah,
All right,
Mahoning Movement Show.
Mahoning Movement Show. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it is to be on this trip of creating a movement and being an advocate for our city. So I'm going to throw it to you. And what are we going to talk about today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I apologize to everyone for not having a guest this week. Next week, we're going to have two lovely guests with Jessica Romeo and Megan Thomas from the Coy Cornelius Studios. And also, Jess works for Mercy Health, and she does things with healthy communities. And so she's a contributor to the Mahoning Movement Project as well. And going to talk about how active lifestyle is a necessity for our communities. I like to joke about the whole idea of having active transportation trails. It's not about recreation. We are not here to have a good time. We're not here to relax.
Suffer.
Yeah.
Suffer in your recreation.
Exactly. The point is that our community needs it not just for transportation, but also for healthy lifestyles, for both physical and mental health. But trails can have a huge impact on our community that way. So Jess will be talking about like healthy eating and healthy communities through active transportation. And we'll also be talking about their ventures up on Belmont at the Coy Cornelius Studios. They're forming a nonprofit up there, and it's all about art and culture in the community. And they've been doing it a long time, but now they're officially a non-profit and doing really cool stuff up there.
See, I think you're my connection to like the relational side of the Valley. I mean, you know so many people and are integrated in so many different communities. Like, how do you pull that off? Like, what's your secret?
Just
there,
being
man?
downtown for a long time. Yeah, I mean, just to talk briefly about Coy Cornelius Studios. So in 2003, I was working at Cedars down here, and that's where I got my start. There would never have been a Lemon Grove or any of that if it wasn't for the influence of Cedars, especially the cafe that opened in 1996 when I was a student at Ursuline, and I would skip taking the school bus home, and I would just walk downtown every day and hang out at Cedars. And unfortunately, that year 2003, I'd already graduated high school. I was at YSU then. I was working at Cedars. That's when the original Coy Cornelius Studios burnt down. And it was a tragic fire. I mean, luckily no one was injured, but a lot of art was lost. And after that, a couple years after that, Coy got the old crystals up on Belmont. And Megan's been keeping the legacy going. Coy unfortunately passed away, and his wife Judy did, and Megan Thomas is keeping it going into the future. So we'll be talking about that next week. But yeah, just forming those relationships, just hanging out downtown. Like we said before on the show, downtown Youngstown was never a ghost town. There's always been an active community, and especially a cultural community. And so yeah, just being down here a long time and knowing people through that.
Yeah, so I've owned a tech company since forever, right? And I always kept my eye on what was happening down here with YBI, and I was a big fan of Jim Costler and everything that he was doing down here. And I when I finally came down here and introduced myself, 7 years had gone by, and I'm thinking, okay, so I knew this guy and I followed this guy and I was a fan of this guy, but it took me 7 years to cozy up to the fact to go meet somebody in person. And I was like, I'm a little disappointed in myself for doing that.
Yeah, you just had to go down the street when he was like,
That's
he would be
like,
cleaning up, he'd be smoking, cleaning up litter in front of the place.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
But yeah, that's why I think I'm going to learn a lot from you, just your ability to get yourself in there on a personal level and get to know people on that level. I'm real bad at small talk, and so even though I can go on the radio and talk about something I'm passionate about for hours, but when it comes to like someone I don't know, I'm real shy when it comes to doing that. So I'm going to lean on you a bunch for that.
I'm kind of like that too. It's like meaningless conversations. What's the point? But I mean, when you have multiple interests, and it's nice to actually talk to people who know about their business, and your stuff. I mean, the studio's obvious about that and the business you've built, and the media as well. So I'm happy to be learning from you through this whole process.
Awesome. Good little marriage here.
It sure is. Yeah. So yeah, we'll be talking about a lot of those things on the show, and yeah, it's gonna be exciting. So the whole Mahoning Movement Project. So this show is gonna be kind of like an outgrowth of that. So kind of kill a couple birds with one stone. The idea of the Mahoning movement is that we are advocating for active transportation trails through the region, most specifically connecting the Stavage Bike Trail and Struthers to the Portage County Hike and Bike Trail. And we are the missing link in that. And if you connect that whole trail, that's the old Pennsylvania and Ohio Canal. So we're both talking about the history of it and advocating for active transportation.
And you can see how that can go forward too. Like getting people to where they need to get to is so important for the survival of businesses in the downtown. If you create blockades where it's tough to use transport, like if you took a railroad and took a chunk out of it in the middle of whatever, right? You disconnect not just that little thoroughway,
Mhm.
but people from getting on one side of the chunk to the other.
Sure, and that's what we're like I said, we're the missing link in this
Yep.
region. Like, you can ride a bike or walk or hike, however you wanna get there, from Ravenna all the way to Cleveland. But if you wanna go east from Ravenna, like I said, there's a gap. But once you get to Struthers, then you can go all the way to Newcastle, and there's trails that, it's a little funny getting between, Newcastle and Pittsburgh, but you could even just cheat and put it on a $4 bus, put your bike on the front of it, go right down to Pittsburgh, and then from Pittsburgh, you could ride all the way to DC. I did that in 2017, and it was really great. Going
How
along,
long? How long was
it
it of
took
a
me
trip?
4 days. I wanted to do it in 3 days, but there was
Holy.
sections where the whole trail was eroded, and I mean, hopefully, don't get me in trouble with this, but I ignore detours. Like, if it says that there's a detour, I kind of just climb over it and go through. And that was a mistake because it was solid mud, and I almost like slipped into the Potomac a couple times. But I made it there. It took me there 4 days to get to DC. But it was awesome. And one of the things that kind of inspired me for this project to kind of justify and gain my master's is how much history you learn along the trail. Like I joked before about, like, I never cared about Lewis and Clark before, but then doing the trail across Missouri, I learned a lot about them, and now I kind of personally know them a little bit better through that. And same thing with our area. So my professor at YSU, I'm a graduate assistant up there, is Dr. Tom Leary, and he's between YSU and the Steel Museum up there, which I highly advocate for anyone who hasn't been up to the Steel Museum to go check it out. But through his classes, I learned more about things called national heritage areas. So the National Park Service, you have your national parks. They don't do national parks anymore where you have your park rangers going around. They don't do that as much because it's really expensive for them to run. So what they've been doing is creating heritage areas and having local organizations run them. So in 2019, Congressman Tim Ryan introduced the Steel Valley National Heritage Area for our area. And it's kind of sat in committee since then, but he confirmed it is still on his radar to hopefully get done, to talk about the heritage of our area, especially the industrial heritage. So to me, the perfect way to tell that story is right along the Mahoning River, which was the heart of it all. We're along the mills. And so if we connect this trail between Struthers and Ravenna, it would take you right along the Mahoning, take you through that industrial corridor, and we could talk about the history while actually making a cleaner future of the environmental recovery of the Mahoning River and whatnot.
Yeah, how likely is it if you make bike trails for like active transportation, like actually getting places people, how many people do you think would switch to that mode of transport? Your opinion only.
Yeah, it depends where people work as well. Can you have trails that will take people where they work? So for instance, Lordstown, there's a lot of development out there, and I have seen that there is talk about creating a spur out to Lordstown as part of to create a active transportation infrastructure. So that would be great. Have they'll be making electric cars out there, but have people get there on their bikes too,
Right.
and so hopefully have a greener
used to have
future.
this dude that would ride a motorcycle like 12 months out of the year, and dead of winter he was riding his motorcycle. Have you ever tried to bike it when the
Oh
weather
yeah.
turned Ohio-ish?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
bike all year round. Yeah, I actually do know a guy. I'm not much of a motorcycle guy, but I do know a fella who rode a motorcycle all the way up to like the Arctic. Like, he had a BMW
Whoa.
motorcycle and he rode it to the Arctic. Yeah. So yeah, as long as you don't peel out too much, you
Right.
should be
Well,
all right.
that's what I think, from the practical side of things. The only thing against it is Ohio weather sucks like 6 months out of the year. And if it were me and it was just something on a beautiful day like today, I would totally bike it to work. You got a battery operated bike. I could just get there in no time at all, especially if I wasn't in a hurry. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But yeah, those other 6 months out of the year, I just don't know that I could or would want to.
It's all about layers. Like, for first couple years I had the pedicab. I was trying to do it year round no matter what. I kind of backed off that because it's just, things are a lot busier now.
Yeah.
But yeah, as long as you got layers, the main thing is having good gloves. What's cool is in New York City, you see a lot of the delivery drivers, and they'll have actual like giant mittens attached to their bike handles, and you just slide right in. So I'm
That's
looking to
cool.
get some of those at some point. Yeah. But
So
yeah,
those homemade, or do they have grips that
I
are
think they
actually
sell them somewhere.
really?
I need to look into it more. But yeah, it looks great. Like, you just put your hands in, and Yeah, I guess nice and toasty. But yeah, New York, they do that year round, delivering stuff. And they all have the e-bikes too, they just zip around.
Oh, heck yeah. Well,
Yeah,
that's all. I mean, I've tried to get around in a car. It sucks to get around a car in New York just
that
because of
is,
the
yeah.
density. Um, so do you when you bike, do you do it by yourself or are you in
Usually by
groups
myself. I'm an
usually?
only child, so I'm used to hanging out by myself. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I usually just take long trips, on my own, and that way you can set your own pace, and like I'm not like a high speed rider, like those guys at Psych Ward, that Keelan and Joe and all those fellas, like they actually and Ray, they actually zoom, they got the skinny road tires and they ride on the street. I don't like to ride on the street at all. But me, I like dedicated trails, I'll pedal as long as I want, and I do a pretty good speed, but it's not about it's more about the adventure of going through there and seeing what you can discover along the way for me.
I have a feeling you're gonna get me out on the road for one of these shows, and we'll do a biking episode,
Yeah.
and check out what it's really like. Because a lot, I bet you, there's a lot of people that listen to this channel that have never once been on any of the bike paths, either in Austintown and Canfield, or the ones down by the river and
Mhm.
Camel.
Yeah. So what's cool about this is the Stavage Trail going to Ravenna, it would intersect with that the North South Trail, which is Western Reserve Greenway, which is the one that goes through Canfield up to Ashtabula. So yeah, the people got to hit at least one of those
For
trails.
sure.
The Stavage Trail is really cool because it's right along the river, and like I said, that goes between Struthers and Newcastle. But the nice new trails one goes all the way up to Ashtabula. It's nicely paved and yeah, I've gone up to Ashtabula a number of times on that, and it's like one of the nicest trails around. And they're going to be connecting the final missing links in it, so you'll be able to go all the way from Lisbon up to Ashtabula soon.
That's cool. Have you ever seen those videos about the people who don't respect the bike lanes on a bike trail and they're like walking their dogs and getting in the way of the bicyclists? You ever seen one
Oh,
of
I
those?
haven't seen one of
Oh,
those
it's
really.
I mean, it is flat out dangerous because people like they acknowledge once they see the bike and they get out of the way, but they're like inches away from getting blasted by bicyclists. So that's another thing that we got to advocate for, that if you're going to use those trails for non-biking,
Hmm.
that you don't get pummeled with a bike.
Yeah, I mean pedestrian. So most are just like 2 lanes, and pedestrians always have the right of way. But you get into some like cities where there is a large bike infrastructure, and they'll have multiple lanes. And actually, going out Shields Road, the East Cohasset Trail is it called? The one that connects 224 to Shields Road out there. That
Okay, I know what you're talking
dedicated,
about.
yeah, that has the 2 lanes where you have the walking lane and the bike riding lane. So yeah, it's just like driving a car. You have rules to the road, and I'm very anti-authoritarian. But when you have practical things like, no, he's here for everyone's safety. You go in this lane, you go in this lane. It's best to just follow it. And you're passing people. You ring bell or whatever, and say on your left. So yeah, just you want to make sure everyone has a comfortable experience on the trail. And I'm a big fan of universal accessibility too. So sometimes I slip and call them like bike trails because that's my main mode of transportation. But the idea is active transportation trails to have them accessible for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're in a
Roller
wheelchair,
skates,
roller
skate.
skate. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes, everybody on wheels, anybody that needs to go somewhere.
As long as you don't have a gas motor, and
Right.
as long as even if you have an electric motor, you don't go over 25 miles an hour, then yeah, it needs to be accessible for everyone. So that's I'm trying to learn more about that accessibility, not just in terms of physical variables, but also cultural variables as well, making sure that it oftentimes kind of considered like a white thing of riding bicycles and stuff. And there's a lot of great people working to change that and involving communities. I learned a lot about that in Detroit, where there's a strong Black community of bicyclists that actually, have you heard Major Taylor?
Mm.
Major Taylor was the first internationally uh, recognized Black champion, and he was a bicycle rider in 1890s and 1900s, and he dealt with like pretty awful racism on and off the track. But he was a internationally famous bicyclist.
No kidding.
And
Cool.
actually, the Warner Brothers here in Youngstown, Ohio, built one of his bikes for him and kind of like did advertising
Sweet.
in conjunction with them. So I met some guys in Detroit that are part of the Major Taylor Cyclists, and they do like anti-racist action while bicycling too. So long story short, making sure that these trails are accessible for everyone not just in terms of physical variables, but culturally as well, and that the story that we tell along it with both the history and culture reflects our larger community along the river.
Yeah, and so let's let's change gears here a little bit off of bicycling. What about like canoeing and using the riverways and stuff like that in a similar type of deal?
Yeah, I want to get into kayaking and canoeing more. I have kayaked a bit on the Mahoning River. I don't have a kayak of my own yet, but I hope to at some point. And I would like to. My goal, actually, Zach Felger, who is my co-chair with me on the Public Use and Recreation Committee for Friends of the Mahoning River, we talk a lot about it. We have it divided up where he's in the water and I'm alongside the water for splitting up our duties for public use and recreation. But we talked about eventually the goal going from Youngstown or Newton Falls down the Mahoning River all the way to New Orleans. Because you got the Mahoning River, which flows into the Beaver River. That'll take you down to the Ohio River down by Monaca.
That would scare me. That transition would be scary. That's a major river.
Yeah, and then from Ohio down into the Mississippi.
Yeah, oh, that's
Yeah,
another one.
yeah. I'm concerned about drowning as well at some point, but you know,
I don't want to go that way.
yeah,
I really don't.
although here it's not that bad, but that first couple of minutes would probably be pretty scary. Yeah, but we're gonna do it at some point. You know, it's I
Yeah.
hear you got to watch out for the wakes from barges and whatnot. You want to stay out of the barges way once you're on the Ohio and the Mississippi. Dams, you definitely got to watch out for dams, which we're lucky in this area that we're taking out all the old, completely useless.
Yeah, but our
display
dams here
industrial.
are tiny dams. Like
You still
ones,
want to go over them, yeah.
right? But the ones on the Ohio River, those
Yeah,
big
those
ones,
big.
those ones will wake you up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely want to avoid them no matter what. But even if it's a small dam, they say you make sure you go around it. You don't want to go over it. There's actually there's been some tragic incidents up around like Leavittsburg. People say, "Oh, it's a little dam. I'm just going to go over it." And the problem is that like once you go over, it kind of like traps you in a cycle, and so you can't escape it. You know. So yeah, definitely always want to practice water safety. But yeah, in terms of water trails, so I'm mainly focusing on the active transportation trails along the water. But yeah, I think it completely should be a water trail as well, which there are those designations. I don't think the Mahoning is officially has that designation yet, but there's parts of like the Cuyahoga River and whatnot that have official water trail designation. In my opinion, like I said, it should be treated as part of our transportation infrastructure. It's not like some kind of extra recreation thing. It's part of our transportation infrastructure, and both in and out of the water, we should treat it like that.
And so like most of our normal travels like on freeways and interstates are very vanilla. Like you can go around and see the change of trees, but it's so like I don't know, typical. Like if you've been on one road, you've been on them all. But if you start experiencing our areas from a bike trail where it's a cutout that's it doesn't affect a lot of the surrounding areas or down the river, traveling is a different
Mhm.
experience when you get to see nature from that side and see the undisturbed, rock formations and whatever. I think
Mhm.
that's the coolest thing about this.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I kind of half joke, maybe 75% joke, or 25% joke that the
It keeps going.
yeah,
Yeah.
that the Eisenhower Interstate Transportation Network, a freeway network, ruined America. You know, it's like you said, it becomes vanilla. You have the same, gas stations along the road the whole way. Even before that, like I'm not completely anti-car. At least before that system, you would have like the Lincoln Highway, the first coast to coast automobile route, that you would have individual businesses, unique experiences, little tourist traps and whatnot. Now, if you travel the interstate highway system, you're looking at the same thing all the way to
Yeah,
California,
I told my
basically.
we travel in a motorhome, and I tell her if I closed your eyes, you fell asleep and woke up, could you even tell where you are? Because it looks the same the whole freaking trip when you're on an interstate.
Yeah, and there's no adventure, romance in that,
That's right. That's right.
So
No Lois and Clark on my trip.
exactly, yeah. So I always try, even if I'm driving somewhere, I always like taking back roads, and that's something else that interests me too about the whole technology thing. That Google Maps and Apple Maps, that they allow for a type of traveling which was not possible uh, 20 years ago, even. Just being actually a friend of mine came with this idea about like off the blue line, like finding, you have the suggested route and then you find other routes to go and you kind of just kind of hop town from town that way. So
But it'll
there's
tell you you're gonna be slower. I hope you like slower.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes the GPS will yell at you, Siri's yelling at you and stuff. But yeah, making your own course that
Yeah.
before you'd have to have all kinds of maps, and now you can go on the fly. Call audibles as you go along.
Like traveling, like you go to AAA and they'd give you a triptych and they would tell you like where the cool stuff to see and they'd like deviate you on purpose.
Mhm.
Well, I haven't seen like a tourist stop in forever when I'm traveling. So it's sort of like that. It's harder to get off the beaten path because everything is, sort of speed base and get there as quick as
Mhm.
possible.
Yeah, so I always tell people, find your own adventure as you go along, and it's cool being able to go place to have the bike in the back of the pickup truck and just park somewhere and then take off on bike too. Mix it up.
Do you carry a bike rack and a bike no matter where you go?
Yeah, luckily I got a truck now, so I just throw the bike in the
There you
back.
go.
Yeah, but pretty much, yeah, wherever I go. Hopefully, at some point, I'll have a kayak too, and just be able to hop in the water. My goal in life is to merge the two, to be able to have a bicycle that I have a little trailer to carry a kayak or canoe with me and go intermodal. I like the idea of intermodal transportation. Like finding, recently I went to Detroit on a mission for the applied history program at YSU, and I took a train there. They had bike rental programs around Detroit. Tried those out. Met some friends let me borrow a bike. I did a lot of walking, probably too much walking. But I pretty much hit every method of transportation. Although I was not able to commandeer a boat. I was trying to find a boat, but I wasn't able to do that. And then I flew back. And
When we were down in the Keys this last summer or early in the summer, we saw somebody who had an inflatable kayak, and we thought, oh, this is brilliant. It's not going to take up all that space in the motorhome. I could just stow it in one of the cabinets. And then they were out by a reef, and it got jagged on
oh
the reef,
yeah,
and they're coming in a little on the flattened side. So
oh
I was
that'd be
like,
scary. Yeah, I can't even keep an air mattress to last, let alone a kayak. Yeah. But I've seen like the paper, like kind of origami, I think might be one of the brands that they say you can fold it together, but I know I'd mess that up.
I would not
Yeah.
trust that at all. If I'm folding it, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you could probably wax and paper do it too, but I've watched enough MythBusters to know how that one turns out, right?
Yeah. There is a cool video of like if you Google or you on YouTube Brompton bike boat and it tells the story of this guy who commutes in Manhattan that he like he has a fold up Brompton bike, has a trailer for a canoe, and then he puts the fold up bike in the canoe and goes down the Hudson to work and then paddles back on his way home.
That is crazy.
Yeah, which I would love to do something like that. But
Yeah. What other outdoorsy stuff do you have on your radar? Do you like spending a lot of time not in the house and you
oh
like
yeah,
being
I
out?
just hate being
Do you really?
inside. Yeah, yeah. I like even like going to restaurants. I always prefer patios. Which, like for instance, shout out to Sela and Struthers. That's one of my favorite places I've ever anywhere. Um,
We've never been there.
Go to
Oh,
Sela.
I've
It's
never
awesome,
been
and
there.
it relates to the whole trail project too, because they are right by where the Stavich Trail is. So I've talked to the owner Brian Palumbo out there about when we eventually do like a mass ride to do the whole trail, like to
Have
stop
a
at
meetup.
Sela.
Heck yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
great. Is that in the bank
it's
building?
the old bank building, just gorgeous atmosphere. See, I oftentimes go to restaurants not for food per se, but for the atmosphere. And they have a perfect, beautiful old bank building and a nice little patio on the side of there, and it's just awesome. Now, unfortunately, the trains come through sometimes, so they have a loud whistle, but I'm okay with that whistle because it serves a purpose. Some whistles do not serve a purpose, and those whistles need to stop. But that whistle serves a purpose, so I can understand
I
it.
love you. So one of my favorite like walking around places is Station Square in
It's
Pittsburgh.
yeah.
And I think that like the reason it's my favorite is because you could park one place and you can head in any direction and see stuff. Like
Mhm.
there's like four different areas that you can go experience, and just by walking and a little maybe one of those ascending things, you take
Mhm.
one of those
Oh, yeah,
up to the
yeah,
top.
and there's a great trail that goes along there, and you could take that, bike trail up to the south side too, up along Carson Street. Yeah, I love Station Square too. I remember even as a little kid, my family taking me there. But yeah, that was part of the old, train lines too. Pennsylvania went through there, or maybe that was actually PLE, but that same line connected to right through Struthers. So yeah,
So
the
model what we're trying to do after places that are already doing it, pretty well, and they
mhm,
have some really good ideas to do public funding on projects like this to see, because again, like you won't see the bloom in the economy and the bloom in businesses until you get people moving around. And if they
mhm.
can't find around your city easy enough, then you get somebody somewhere, but then it just fizzles out. They don't
Yeah.
maneuver
Yeah,
around.
the economics of it all are amazing. Like Rails to Trails as an organization, they do a lot of great work documenting the positive economic impact of trails. Um, like, and for instance, like doing the Katy Trail across Missouri, like these little towns, they would have no, they were railroad towns originally, but once the railroad goes, what I mean, they would be ghost towns. But the trail actually pretty much keeps them alive in terms of the economics, in terms of travelers coming through. And we can have that dual benefit of creating an economic impact for our residents here and new businesses along the trail, but also bringing in those outside tourist dollars too.
When I'm thinking the movie that keeps popping in my brain, that Lightning McQueen, that cartoon, what the heck was it? It was a race car. It was a can't think of it. But anyway, the whole premise of the movie was that they had these little stops along, small interstates, and they bring it or small roadways, and then they brought in the interstates, and all those businesses went
Oh,
out of business along
oh,
it. So
really? There's a
the cartoon, kids cartoon, yeah.
like a one of the Pixar's, like Cars
Yeah,
or something
yeah,
like that?
Cars. That's
Is
it.
that it? Okay, I
That's
never
it. Yeah,
saw it, but
that's the
now that I know
premise.
that's the premise, I gotta watch it.
Gotta watch
Yeah.
it.
Well, yeah, like going back to before talking about like the Lincoln Highway and stuff. So that was the original coast to coast automobile route, and it goes right through Lisbon, Ohio. And so, like I wrote a paper last semester talking about like the different forms of transportation because the bike trail goes down to Lisbon, and once you're in Lisbon, you can see the national highway there. So it's cool, like thinking about the different modes. And yeah, you could take the Lincoln Highway coast to coast.
That's so cool.
Yeah, when they first started doing it, like there were so many just mud roads, and then over years, they improved the infrastructure of it all.
All right. So why don't you tell everybody the guests that are going to be coming over in the next couple of weeks so that we can
Yeah, Megan Thomas and Jessica Romeo of the Coy Cornelius. Well, actually, the nonprofit that they're forming is called Honeycomb, but it's at the Coy Cornelius Studios. So they'll be here next week. Couple other guests. I was trying to get the Martinis to come down, but it's busy day at the restaurant.
okay. I
And
can't wait to see them though.
Yeah,
We'll do it eventually, right?
yeah. Come on, Sophia. Come on, Dan. And Joey too. Joey drives truck for Superior, so it's tough
Okay.
to get him during the day. But
They're hardworking people.
they
That's for
are,
sure.
yeah. They're great partners to have and all. And Joey's a professional wrestler too, so he's interesting to talk to about stuff like that too.
We'll have them all
Sometimes,
on. Get them on down
get the
here.
whole family down.
Yeah.
Yep. So we got them coming on. We want to talk politics sometime. Our councilman Julius Oliver,
Okay.
invite him to be on the show to talk about this stuff, but
Beautiful.
also maybe talk about some
Yeah,
political
absolutely.
stuff too.
Yeah,
sometime.
I'd like to go some head-to-head stuff because I think of all the people, like one of my favorite persons to go dialogue with was Mo Ray.
Mm.
And I'm a libertarian. You're on the spectrum.
I'm an anarcho-Marxist, but there's some overlap.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
You're going to probably find that we agree on a lot, but it's the intensities is probably what we have some disagreements on, and that's probably about it. But I'm looking forward to those discussions.
Absolutely.
So. All right, cool. Well, anything else?
That's it for this week.
All right, cool. See you
Thanks,
guys
Joe.
next week.
See y'all.